The South Korean government is set to unveil the results of its own investigation into the Fukushima wastewater release plant in the wake of the final report by the UN nuclear watchdog. And IAEA chief Rafael Grossi is due in Seoul tomorrow, wrapping up his trip to Japan. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol will embark on a 6-day trip to Lithuania and Poland next week, during which he will attend the NATO Summit on global security cooperation. There will be a sideline meeting with Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Amid the ongoing war in Ukraine, a choir group from that country sings about peace and hope in Korea's eastern coastal city of Gangneung, where the World Choir Games is taking place. We had a chance to talk to them. It's July 6, 2023. This is News Center.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Following the IAEA report, South Korea is set to release its own independent report tomorrow of Japan's plans to discharge wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant into the ocean. This comes as the head of the UN nuclear agency is scheduled to visit Korea for 3 days starting tomorrow. Our Bae Eun-ji begins our coverage.
As anxiety and anger grow over Japan's planned release of Fukushima wastewater, South Korea on Friday will issue a report containing its own assessment of the matter.
Based on data collected from the on-site inspection of the Fukushima nuclear power plant and the information Japan has unveiled so far, our government has been conducting its own independent review of Tokyo Electric Power Plant's plan to discharge wastewater.
Announcing the plan, the government said the review is in its final stage, following a 2-year process. It's expected to include the South Korean government's overall assessment of the discharge plan, as well as some suggestions for Japan. This coincides with the chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi's visit to South Korea, scheduled from Friday to Sunday. He plans to head to Seoul after wrapping up his trip to Japan to meet with Foreign Minister Park Jin and the chairperson of the Nuclear Safety and Security Commission, Yoo-ki. Earlier on Tuesday, the IAEA released a comprehensive report approving Japan's plan to release the wastewater into the Pacific Ocean, saying it meets international safety standards. And as the Japanese government seeks more support from neighboring countries, the leaders of South Korea and Japan will likely meet next week. The presidential office said Thursday that it's working with Tokyo to arrange a meeting between President Yoon Suk-yeol and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the NATO Summit in Lithuania. A senior official from the presidential office said if the meeting does take place, the two leaders are expected to discuss the Fukushima wastewater issue. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea is due to hold an overnight rally on Thursday to protest Japan's plan to release wastewater from the devastated Fukushima nuclear power plant. The party has also announced planned legislation for a new bill that would ban all seafood imports from Japan if the release does take place. The ruling People Power Party, on the other hand, said that the DP is denying science by denouncing not only the government but also the IAEA. It added that the government should continue to conduct independent tests based on the IAEA's scientific test results to lessen the public's anxiety. President Yoon Suk-yeol will attend the NATO Summit for the second consecutive time, heading over to Lithuania next Monday, before crossing over to Poland to discuss broader cooperation on Ukraine and more. A separate bilateral sit-down with Japan's Prime Minister is currently being arranged. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has what's on his itinerary.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will discuss support and reconstruction for Ukraine at the NATO Summit next week in Lithuania and make a state visit to Poland, rolling out Seoul's defense and self-diplomacy in Europe. Yoon's office said Thursday that the South Korean leader will attend the 2-day security meeting in Vilnius, focusing on increasing two-way cooperation between the 31-member alliance and the Indo-Pacific region, beginning with the war in Ukraine.
The president will lay out South Korea's contributions to peace in Ukraine, one of the most important issues among the international community, and will concretely set forth our global responsibility diplomacy.
A senior official said while it's unlikely Seoul will issue a completely new support package for Kyiv, it continues to factor in the complex circumstances in Ukraine and Russia and consult other nations on aid provision. Also, Seoul and NATO will adopt a new document to institutionalize cooperation in 11 areas, including non-proliferation, cybersecurity and emerging technologies. North Korea will also be on the agenda, with Seoul and NATO countries jointly warning that Pyongyang's illegal actions will not be tolerated as the regime develops its nuclear capabilities. On that note, Yoon will meet with NATO Secretary General on Tuesday and hold over 5 bilateral summits along with various multilateral engagements. The president himself will moderate a 4-way summit with other NATO partner nations, Japan, Australia and New Zealand, and a separate bilateral sit-down with Tokyo is currently being arranged. Crossing the border to Poland on Wednesday, Yoon will meet with South Korean nationals before holding a bilateral summit with his counterpart Andrzej Duda on Thursday, followed by subsequent meetings with the Prime Minister and parliamentary speakers. Branching out Seoul and Warsaw's burgeoning trade ties, Yoon will attend 3 main business events, which include a business forum, a conversation with local Korean firms, and notably, a discussion with Korean companies on reconstruction efforts on Ukraine.
The president will be joined by an 89-member economic delegation, including not only firms in industries like batteries, defense and nuclear power plants, but also many construction firms interested in rebuilding Ukraine. We will listen to their entry strategies and bottlenecks and discuss the government's support measures.
A senior official told reporters that a trip to Ukraine is not on Yoon's itinerary, nor is it currently being arranged. However, the president will hold bilaterals with more than 10 countries, excluding Poland, next week, not only to expand Korea's diplomatic and trade ties, but also to strengthen its bid to host the 2030 World Expo in the city of Busan. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Today, we take a closer look at the economy. Recent price index shows inflation has somewhat stabilized here in Korea, but the economic performance in the first half was rather weak. Will the country see a rebound in the latter half? For more, our economic correspondent Shin Ha-young joins me in the studio. Welcome, Ha-young.
Great to be back, Jung-min.
So, can we expect South Korea to see a rebound in the second half?
Well, Seoul's finance ministry has slashed its growth projection for this year to 1.4%, citing a sluggish performance in the first 6 months. And looking back at the first half, exports, which are crucial to South Korea's economy, continue to decline. And data from the Trade Ministry shows that the value of exports fell 6% from the year before in June. And that's the 9th consecutive month that monthly exports have seen an on-year drop. And this was mainly due to delayed recovery in the chip industry, which produces the nation's key export item. And in fact, chip export last month fell 28% compared to the previous year. And other factors include a fall in exports to China amid a rather weak reopening from China. But on the bright side, the on-year decline in overall exports in June was the smallest so far this year, indicating that the country's exports may rebound in the latter half. Also, the country saw a trade surplus in June for the first time in 16 months. Considering such notable economic indicators, South Korea's finance minister expects the country to see a distinct recovery as it approaches the end of the year, particularly due to a recovery in the IT industry. And one expert I spoke to was optimistic about a rebound in the semiconductor industry. Let's take a listen.
The chip industry recovers faster than other industries. This is because it has a certain period where its supply decreases while demand itself rises slowly, indicating a recovery. Currently, the chip supply continues to decrease and the economy is gradually recovering, which means it's clear that the second half is a period where the demand to supply ratio improves.
And Ha-young, what are the prospects for inflation from July to December? It has continued to slow in recent months.
You're right, Jung-min. South Korea's consumer prices, a key gauge of inflation, have slowed for the first 6 months. And in fact, last month, it rose by 2.7% compared to the previous year. And this is the first time that on-year hikes fell to the 2% range in 21 months. And Seoul became one of only 3 countries in the G20 group of countries that recorded consumer price hikes in the 2% range. And based on that trend, the government has lowered its inflation outlook for the year from 3.5% to 3.3%. But there are still lingering factors that could raise prices, such as geopolitical risks and accumulated pressures for price hikes, including for public utility fees.
Consumer prices have cooled down to the 2% range, indicating price stability. One of the main factors for this is weakened oil prices. So when oil prices rise again, inflation may climb again.
Meanwhile, the Bank of Korea has frozen its key interest rate for the third time in a row thanks to a slowdown in inflation. But considering the currency market, we will still have to keep an eye on the BOK's policy rate in the second half, including this month, as central banks in Europe have raised their key rates, while more rate hikes are likely in the U.S. following a recent pause.
And what were the major takeaways from what the Finance Ministry unveiled this week for its economic policy direction for the second half?
Well, in response, the government unveiled 4 economic policy directions on Tuesday, and mainly focusing on economic rebound and people's livelihood. First, let's take a listen to what an official had to say.
In the second half of this year, the government will focus on enhancing economic vitality, stabilizing people's livelihoods, improving the economic structure, and preparing for the future.
First, it will boost sluggish exports by injecting a record-breaking 184 trillion Korean won, or roughly $140 billion into trade financing during the second half of the year. And it also aims to stimulate domestic consumption by boosting tourism. And it'll do so by distributing 300,000 vouchers worth $23 each to be used for accommodation during off-season travel. And also, free round-trip flight tickets will be given out, targeting visitors from countries such as Japan, Taiwan, and China. And to stabilize prices, it plans to minimize increase in public utility fees such as gas bills. And in order to ease the cost burden on vulnerable groups, the government will expand its so-called energy cashback plan. Households can apply to get a certain amount of money back on their bills if they use less gas than they did last year.
Our economics correspondent Shin Ha-young, thank you.
Thank you.
Exports of South Korea's cultural content last year surpassed shipments of home appliances and textile products, such as apparel, in terms of monetary value. The Korea International Trade Association said on Thursday that exports of cultural content, including online games and music, continued to be in the black, totaling $13.3 billion in 2022. The association added that the success of content exports is also leading to an expansion of the shipments of consumer goods such as cosmetics and processed food. However, it expressed concerns about the concentration of exports to the Asia region, saying more measures were needed to diversify the overseas destinations for local content. LG Energy Solution and Stellantis will immediately resume the construction of a battery plant in Ontario, Canada, after reaching a deal with the Canadian government for subsidies equivalent to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. The project, expected to be operational in 2024, will create 2,500 new jobs and have an annual production capacity exceeding 45 gigawatt hours. The construction's halt, which started in May, was due to disagreements between the federal and provincial governments regarding incentives. South Korea's presidential office expressed gratitude to the Canadian government for this development. According to an official at the top office, during Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's visit to Seoul, President Yoon instructed LG's CEO and industry ministers from both countries to resolve this issue. The U.S. says it firmly opposes China's recent export controls on metals required for making chips. Amid renewed tensions between Washington and Beijing, eyes are now on the trip by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to China for a dialogue. Kim Hyun-sung has more.
The U.S. is trying to mend relations with China through a visit by a high-ranking U.S. official starting Thursday. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will embark on a 3-day diplomatic mission with the main goal of engaging in dialogue with several top-level leaders, including Chinese Prime Minister Li Qiang and Finance Minister Liu Kun. She will also meet with the heads of American companies in Beijing. The visit marks the second high-profile diplomatic outreach by Washington in less than a month. In June, Secretary of State Antony Blinken broke a 5-year drought when he became the first in his role to set foot on Chinese soil. Yellen's visit is to foster a more open dialogue between the U.S. and China, but it comes amidst rising tensions surrounding technology-related exports. Just this week, China implemented stringent export controls on gallium and germanium, both materials instrumental in the manufacture of secondary batteries for electric vehicles. In a sudden move, Beijing declared the policy would take effect from the 1st of August, setting off a shopping frenzy among companies to secure supplies before the deadline. The U.S. Commerce Department spokesperson said on Wednesday local time that Washington firmly opposed the move, highlighting it underscores the urgent need to diversify supply chains. Treasury Secretary Yellen is anticipated to bring these concerns to the table during her visit, as both countries work towards smoothing out the creases in their complex relationship. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
This year's World Choir Games in Korea's coastal city of Gangneung includes a special group of singers seeking to share a message of peace and perseverance amid war in their country. Song Yujin has their story.
The Vognyk Choir from Ukraine is turning heads here at the World Choir Games in Gangneung. Based in Kyiv, this all-girls choir has been spreading the beauty of contemporary Ukrainian choir music since 1970. But their journey to Gangneung wasn't an easy one. Due to the ongoing war, the 38-member choir had to take a 16-hour bus ride to Poland to catch a flight to Korea.
It's become a part of our daily routine to hear air raid sirens blaring, a constant reminder of missiles and drones overhead, forcing us to seek refuge in bomb shelters. It's tough, but we've never lost hope or given up, thinking that we would win. We always carry hope with us, and that's what brought us here today.
For these girls, being part of the choir goes beyond just singing.
It's like the talks of your soul. Sometimes after a hard day you come, you sing, and all your emotions go away, but nice emotions are coming to you. I like singing in choir because music connects us, and music can connect everyone in the world without knowing any language.
Their debut performance at this year's World Choir Games was on Wednesday evening, where they were the final act of the celebration concert. The Vognyk Choir aims to raise spirits in their home country while rallying support from around the world.
Yes, our message that we want the world to know that our country is in pain right now, but there is always a hope about peace. We would like you to pray for us, and we guess that when Ukraine will win, the peace will come to the world.
We want to show the world that Ukraine is, and will stay strong. We are alive. We continue to work, we raise children, and we live our lives. It's not easy, but we are forging ahead. We believe Ukraine will win.
But the choir's journey at the World Choir Games is far from over. They have a highly anticipated performance at the closing ceremony next Thursday, where their harmonious voices will once again show that even in the darkest times, the universal language of music has the power to heal and unite. 송유진, Arirang News, Gangneung.
From childhood memories of grandparents' folktale storytelling to the present-day storytellers known as Storymamas, the tradition of passing down enchanting tales continues. And as our Shin Se-byuk reports, it's becoming an attractive key content.
옛날 어느 냇가에 엄마 청개구리와 아들 청개구리가 함께 살았어요.
Once upon a time, the magical phrase instantly transports kindergartners into the captivating world of fairy tales and folk tales. These stories are passed down orally through generations, keeping them alive for centuries. This is a story mama whose animated storytelling style adds a new dimension to the way the tales are told.
Today we listened to the tree frog story and it was fun.
I love listening to Storymamas stories more than reading books.
This initiative started in 2009 with 30 Storymamas. Fast forward to today, and it has become a flagship project of the Culture Ministry with over 3,000, captivating young minds in more than 8,600 childcare centers nationwide. The project not only promotes social engagement for the elderly, but also preserves Korean traditions, folklore, and the country's cultural heritage.
There are quite a few folktales that only a story mama can share with children. They're not found in books. That's why it's really important for the tradition of story mamas to continue so that children can keep them as their own and not forget them.
Furthermore, it transforms into captivating content, blending entertainment and valuable life lessons through timeless stories. Several broadcasters in South Korea have embraced this concept, presenting TV entertainment programs featuring story mamas. And soon, story mamas will be part of K-content, disseminating traditional Korean stories worldwide.
We plan to produce video content that combines a story mama's narratives with foreign language subtitles. They'll be available online through platforms like the King Sejong Institute website and YouTube.
As the magical tales of Story Mama continue to be told, generations connect, imaginations soar, and traditions thrive. And now they are ready to go global. 신새벽, Arirang News.
The nation will see contrasting weather patterns tomorrow. Central parts of the country, including Seoul and Gangneung, will be sweltering at 32 degrees Celsius. Conditions will feel hotter than the actual readings due to high moisture levels in the air. For the south, where monsoonal showers are in the forecast, temperatures will be much lower. Along with the cold winds, Busan will be reaching 25 degrees. As for the amount of rainfall, Jeju Island and the south coast will see up to 150 millimeters. Jeollabuk-do province will see up to 100. Chungcheong-do province and the surrounding regions will see 5 to 30 millimeters. In central parts of the country where no rain is in the forecast, intense UV radiation will be seen. For the Seoul-Metropolitan area, Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do provinces, the UV ray index will stand in the high to very high range. Make sure to wear plenty of sunblock before you head out. Tomorrow, Seoul, Gwangju, and Busan will be starting off at 23 degrees. Highs in Seoul will get up to 32, Daejeon 29, Gyeongju will be reaching 28 degrees. On Sunday, scattered outbreaks of rainfall are expected nationwide. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.